Hello humans, Master Dinnerflex here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve, and today I'll be going over Despia Darklord. Now, I don't want to go over this rant because this rant will take like 30 minutes, and I think you guys just want to see the deck. But pretty much, this is the only version of Despia I actually think is real. And that's so weird. That is actually just such a weird thing for me to say, because like Darklords are definitely not a competitive engine, whereas Shaddolls and Dogmatica have been. But the issue is, the reason I say this is the most real version is because both in Despia Shaddolls and Despia Dogmatica, the Despias are a infinitely, absolutely worse version of the Invoked engine. They literally they have the exact same kind of win condition, or like engine requirement that the Invoke does, except they do it worse. All the fusion summons they summon are worse, and they do less. So it doesn't make any sense to play either of those decks, because Alistair will just do the same thing those are doing, but like way better. So that's the point I want to get across there, and I'm not going to go much into it because there's a lot of examples on why neither of those decks make any sense. But unlike those decks, the Despias actually matter for this deck. They actually are very important to this deck's win condition, how the deck functions, and what you are trying to do with the deck. But let's just get straight into it. So as you can see here, this deck list is very strange. It definitely feels like a not modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But yesterday, I was in a stream with Phoenix Flare X. It was his stream, and we wanted to test a Despia deck because we thought it was all like mediocre. And what we found out like super quick is if you're not playing Despia Darklord, there's literally no point in playing a Despia engine in pretty much anything. They don't serve any cool function in any deck besides this one. And this deck is very strange because it feels like like I said, a not modern Yu-Gi-Oh combo deck, but it works in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. Like it obviously it's not like a tier 1 contender, but it actually functions at a modern pace, and that is really interesting. Because after we were done doing test hands and he ended his stream, I decided I would also playtest this against real decks. And what I noticed very quickly is that it actually plays through hand traps. It actually plays through disruptions. And it's like very easy to just win the first turn you get. Because of the fusion monster. So this deck is very terrifying. And also because all the monsters it summons are so huge, your opponent has to use effects on them, even when you would normally want to hold them. Because these starters and extenders in this deck, instead of just being weenie monsters that access links, these are giant monsters that access links. So sometimes you can just summon big guys and leave them there. But yeah, so that's pretty much how this deck functions. Despite being built like an old school combo deck, it still plays at a pace that's more modern. But let's just get into it. We got triple Yugioh. This deck is all about... The deck has two... Once it sees these two different things, it has achieved its win condition, and you want to do that as many times as possible. And that is, you want to see 3 Dark Fairies, and you want to see the field spell. Once you see both of those things, you are good to go. And one of the ways to do that is with a lot of draw power, so Yugioh being, like, the best version. But because of the first Darklord, which I will go into later, you need to get Superbia to graveyard as fast as possible, and Yugioh doing that while also being, like, one of the best Superbia targets, while also drawing 2 cards, while also copying all the spells and traps. This is just an absolute 3 of, you don't even need to think about it. Then we got Indulge Darklord. This used to, like, for the Darklord deck before we got the Despia stuff, this was just awful. It was such a spit in the face for this deck, because it already had restrictions of locking you into fairy effects, so you couldn't do really stupid stuff with the deck already. But then they made it as Stratos that gives your opponent a monster, and that was such an absolute disgusting spit in the face. But in this deck, it doesn't matter. And you could even argue in the before Despia it didn't matter. But this one is even substantially less, to the point where this is literally the best normal summon in the deck. When it's normal or special summoned, you give your opponent a Darklord monster, and then you add one from your deck to your hand with a different level than the one you gave them. But for the rest of the turn after you activate it, you can only activate fairy monsters, which is fine. So this one Darklord is 2 Darklords, effectively, because, like I said, you're wanting to summon the first Darklord, which needs 3 materials, but this one material is actually 2 materials, while also giving you access to the very specific Superbia that you need in your graveyard. Speaking of which, Superbia, if there's a win condition of this deck, like if I could point it out once you get the engine going, it's to loop Superbia literally as many times as possible. You want to use this over and over and over and over and over again. So yep, triple Superbia. It not being once per turn is definitely what makes this deck, because we're trying to use this as many times as possible in a turn. And then 1 Nurgle. So we needed another level 8 Darklord, and the 2 choices were Zerato and Nurgle. So Zerato is effectively a Regeki by discarding a dark monster, but that wasn't great. Like, it's neat, but we really wanted one that could copy spells and traps, and Nurgle is the only one that does it for a level 8. Its other effect is that fairies do piercing battle damage, which, to be fair, since all of your monsters are massive, that probably comes up. And for the last Darklord, it's Ukabak, the worst normal summon by far. I guess it's kind of cute or neat and even useful that it can send spells and traps instead of just monsters. But you definitely only really want to give this to your opponent with Indulge Darklord and then call it a day. And then for the Despias, we got triple Albur, because the field spell is literally how you start playing with this deck. Triple Tragedy and triple Dramaturge. So this is like a maxed out Despia engine. And that, like I said, we need to see 3 monsters for the field spell. But what's really nice is that the Despia cards, like again, they actually have synergy with the Darklords, but this synergy comes from the draw power that Darklords play, because Despian Tragedy, whenever it's banished or sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you search another Despia card. So if it gets lured away, not only do you draw 2 cards, but you get to search another monster. So, that's very nice. It feels like an old school, like, Cards of Constance, Whitestone of Legend. You just get another card that you need, so this is very nice. And then Dramaturge, it is the trade-in target because it's level 8. But also, this is actually probably the only one that has value past turn 1. Because once you use Albur once to get the field spell, it's not going to search anything else but another field spell. So it's kind of just there. And Tragedy only really acts as a floater, so it's not really relevant when it comes back or used again. But Dramaturge being a form of negation is important. Being a level 8 is important. So it's just really nice to have access to this card. And it will be something... It's probably the only Despia that has value past turn 1. So that's it for the monsters. 20 monsters. For the spells, it's just like a bunch of turbo cards, like triple Darklord Rhoda searches any Darklord card except itself. Contact revives any Darklord in your graveyard. So it's a reborn. Also, this doesn't target, so if they try to like DD Crow with Superbia, you just revive something else. Then Despia, Theater of the Branded. This is your win. This is the win condition of your deck. During your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials, which will be the first Darklord. If a face-up non-fusion monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect or is destroyed by battle, you can target 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So what's really interesting is you might not... what's really interesting is if you get Nibiru while you have both a fairy on field and the first Darklord, you just get to bring the first Darklord back because you usually have another non-fusion fairy on board, which is like the thing I want to point out with this is once you get the first Darklord established, you have pretty much won the game. Your opponent really can no longer stop much of anything, and I'll go into its effects soon on why, but because of the fact that this can refloat into the first Darklord over and over again is super terrifying. Which is why I say if you want to beat this deck, you have to prevent the first Darklord from coming out. And then one terraforming to search the field spell, which, again, it's the win condition of the deck. You have to see it. Then we got triple allure, triple trade-in. Allure is nice when you pitch a tragedy. Any other time, it's kind of like so-so. Because you don't really want to banish your monsters. You don't want to do that at all. And, like, okay, so let me go over both Allure and Trade-In. So, Allure is a 2-for-2 spell that Ash doesn't strictly punish, because the 2 is committed by effect instead of cost, like Trade-In is. However, Trade-In, a lot of the time, drawing 2 cards is good, but the most important function of it is sending Superbia from your hand to the graveyard. That is, like, some of its most important usage is, like, just doing that. So, when you allure, you take that out of the equation. So, when you don't see tragedy, it's kind of like, man, I really didn't want to banish that. But, that being said, you need to turbo through all your cards. You need to see as many cards as possible to get to as many just like Reborns and Rhodas and monsters as fast as you can. And while it is a little weird that you're using these to get rid of monsters from your hand, it's fine because the revivals and like Indulge get you recover all the monsters you lost and then some. So it's totally fine to banish them as long as you don't like overcommit to doing it. Then we got 1 Foolish Burial and 1 Gold Sarcophagus. Because Despian Tragedy triggers when it's sent to the graveyard or banished by card effect, both of these effectively just act as Rhoda for Albert, which is for the field spell. So you're effectively playing 9 field spells in a deck with multiple cards that say draw 2. So you are good to go. And then finally, Reborn, which is a little weird to see in a modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but it's simply because Superbia is not once per turn, so there's no reason not to use this effect, not to revive it as many times as possible, and Reborn is a way to do that. So, yeah, Reborn. And finally, for the one singular trap is Darklord Rebellion. I know you really don't need any other kind of trap. Not only that, something I didn't mention is the only branded spell trap I'm playing is Despia the Theater. None of the others matter for this deck. You don't want to search the E-Telly because you don't want to be locked in for the rest of the turn. You don't want to search Screams of the Branded because it's so win more. By the time you can use it, you've probably already won anyways. Because you have to be fully playing for it to even be live. So that one doesn't matter. So it's just like outside of the field spell, there's really nothing worthwhile to search with it. But that's fine because it's the win condition of the deck. But yep, that's basically it for the main deck. For the extra deck, I'll go over the side last, is Condemned Darklord. You don't make it too much, but when you do make it, it acts more as a Dark Grepher than it does adding cards to your hand, because you don't really want to turn 2 monsters into 1 before you fusion summon. So the only time you're using this is after you fusion summon. You will make this to send a Superbia from deck to graveyard, which then first Darklord can revive it. Which, even though the first Darklord can revive from hand, this only triggers when revived from graveyard. Then Herald of Mirage Lights, I have made this in this deck. What's really nice is all the Fairy extra deck monsters, such as Apollousa, Condemned, and Mirage Lights, the first Darklord actually protects. And I'll go over into it in a moment. Then IP Masquerena, this is like the most common Link 2, because you're trying to summon Apollousa on your opponent's turn, because the first Darklord, again, revives on your opponent's turn, which this can really exploit. Nightmare Phoenix and Unicorn, this extra deck is not tight at all. You have plenty of flex spots, so might as well just play these if you can't think of anything else. Apollousa, it's a fairy, so it gets all the protection that everything else does. Access Code, and then Underworld Goddess, because you give your opponent's monster with Indulged, you can sometimes punish them with it, with IP, and with this made with IP is just kind of insane. And then finally, the win condition that I've been mentioning so long is the first Darklord. So it requires 3 Dark Fairy monsters, which is literally every main deck monster. And it has 2 effects, but the first effect I want to go over is your opponent cannot target fairy monsters you control with card effects. That includes itself, and it includes literally every monster on your board. So, because of that really, really powerful blanket protection, you very easily get to a point where Imperm and Valor are no longer possible. But more importantly, on your opponent's turn, when you have like Apollousa or Herald of Mirage Lights, they can't just go Imperm on it and call it a day. No, they actually have to try to out it through destruction or battle, which will be a lot more difficult. But anyways, then it has 2 effects. The first effect we literally cannot use in this deck. It's when it's fusion summon using Morningstar, you blow up your opponent's entire field. That doesn't matter. Literally have never used it. You never want to do that, because the only way that makes any logical sense is if your opponent has a massive board and you fusion summon the first Darklord and your opponent just cannot stop that from happening. Which, that doesn't make any sense. That's not a real game state that would happen. So I just cut Morningstar because it's a do-nothing brick. So this effect doesn't work. Because also, another reason is that among those 2 effects, Among Us, you can only use one or the other. You can't use both in the same turn. Which, this is the effect we want to use all the time. And that's during the main phase quick effect, during either player's turn, you can pay 1,000 life points, special summon 1 fairy monster from your hand or graveyard in defense. Which, every single time you use that effect, you want to revive Superbia. So, literally just revive it as many times as possible, because this 1 fairy monster is 2 fairy monsters. So that's like the win condition of the deck, and once it gets established, it's I don't think I've ever lost the moment it hit the board. And then finally, for the rank 8s, which are actually probably some of the most important extra deck monsters, is Hope Harbinger. Not only does it negate spells, but it also prevents, like, Mirage Light and Apollousa from being attacked over, which is very nice. Zombie Stein, it's an Omni Negate, and it only requires Dark monsters. Also, it's absolutely massive, so that's cool. One thing I will say about these 2 is that you cannot activate their effects once you used Indulged, but that doesn't matter because these cards only really have their effects on the opponent's turn, so you can summon these the turn you use Indulge, but they just won't do anything yet. But that's fine, because you're summoning these going first. And then Dingirsu for going second. Not only does it add destruction protection to your field, but it also just removes anything, which is nice. And then Gimmick Puppet Giant Grinder. I couldn't think of a better go second rank 8. Because the only one that would, like, fit this description was Heliopolis, but I don't feel like getting rid of a whole bunch of monsters just to use this effect, whereas this one just clears 2 things, which is nice. And then finally, Zeus. I guess if you, like, go against your opponent, you, like, Dingirsu a thing, attack with it, and then main phase 2 Zeus, that's nice. But, more importantly, like I said, this extra deck's not tight, And I remember that this card does have generic materials, and that is 2 level 12 monsters. And we exactly play 2 level 12 monsters, which is the first Darklord. So I guess by turn 3 you can make a Zeus and threaten with it. Which, to be fair, you can revive the first Darklord. Once it's fusion summoned, you can revive it with Contact or Superbia. Literally, it doesn't matter. So, you can revive this over and over and over again, which is nice. So that's cool. Like, that's something to keep in mind. But yep, that's about it for the deck. The side deck, as you can see, is just filled with 1-card blowouts. Because, like I said, this deck is so... It needs so many cards to work that you only really want to side deck in 1 card that does multiple things. Like Lightning Storm or Feather Duster or whatnot. Because anything else doesn't really make sense for the deck. Because you don't want to throw your entire hand for a droplet when you know for a fact that's not going to achieve anything because you gave up your hand. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that's basically what you need to keep in mind for the side deck, is you want to have the highest power but lowest investment cards as possible. Like these cards, including some of the hand traps like Lancia and Droll too. But yep, that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you understand the reason I like this deck over any other Despia version is because in this version, them being Despia means they're not just worst Alistair the Invoked. Like, it... Yeah. But yep, that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master Dinnerflax will take your soul.